Okay, so guys, welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Inoue versus Tsutsumi fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Inoue is 20-1 with 5 KOs and Tsutsumi is 11-0-2 with 8 KOs. This fight is for the WBA World Bantamweight title. Inoue's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Ishida, and Tsutsumi last fight was a win via TKO in round 4 versus Lei. Inoue's loss came by unanimous decision versus Ubali in 2019. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, it's the start of, well, this is the start of the back-to-back big fights, big fight nights in Japan, and like I mentioned, it's a great main event. Inoue Tsutsumi, I think it's an underrated fight, to be honest. I think a lot of people haven't realised the talent in which Tsutsumi has. Obviously, if you look at face value at his record, perhaps you don't think anything too crazy of it. You see the 2 draws, and that's early on in his career, and you think, perhaps he's struggled at lower level opponents. But realistically, when you go back to them 2 draws, they're against 2 guys who are very high level. I mean, Higa in one of them is just fought for the world title versus Takai and got very close to winning there. And then another one was, I can't remember the guy's name, but another one was another high level fight as well, where he probably did do enough to win. And so, like I mentioned there, he's not been given these easy type fights to start off with. A lot of Japanese fighters you do see get early losses, early draws and things like that, because they are tested with the matchmaking so early on. You don't necessarily see what you see in England, where it's like a journeyman who's 0 and like 100 facing somebody on their pro debut. A lot of the time you see debutants fighting debutants and things like that, and they also have good tournament formats and things like that go ahead, and they're always very well matched as well. So a lot of the time you do see very close competitive fights, and that's what Tsutsumi has been in, and he's been able to succeed realistically now to get to the point where he's at, where he is warranted, very much deserving this world title shot, where Inoue is, of course, the big name now that necessarily he is. He's kind of branching himself away from being that of his brother's shadow, in my opinion. I think he has managed to step away from that a bit more now. I think perhaps in the past he may have been a little bit frustrated because of everything that's been going on with his brother and him kind of having to sit and wait around. It seemed like he was sitting at super bantamweight a bit too long and waiting around for fights to be made and waiting around for his brother to move up to then be able to go down to bantamweight, a division in which he was more comfortable and really push on. But of course, now he's in a position where he really is pushing on, and obviously last time out it was a win which was a good win for him. It was a solid opponent in Ishida, not anything too crazy, but a solid opponent. He did get dropped, but he managed to come back and face adversity and managed to get a clear unanimous decision win in the end. So he has faced that, like I say, bit of adversity now, and he's been able to push through that, and he's now at a point now where he is a cemented champion, and he's probably going to be facing arguably his toughest test here in Tsutsumi, in my opinion. I mean, if you talk about the other fights in which he's had so far, and Kayas was a fight in which he didn't realistically have to be able to do loads to have success, because Enkayas looked very poor and looked kind of past his best, and he hasn't really looked the same since, to be honest. I mean, it was a very poor version of Enkayas, and like I say, he is, in my opinion, past his best at this point, and that was an easier win for him. And Solis as well, I believe he won the belt off, and that was another fight where perhaps the opponent's not crazily in his prime anymore, but he's managed to come in and pick it up at a good time when it was a vacant title as well. So he's been able to win relatively comfortably most of the fights in which he's had at a high level, but perhaps he has been maybe not picking the opponents, but been progressing at a slower level, because I don't know, I just think he's not been put in a really tough test yet. I believe he's been improving very much so with each and every fight, but I think this is, like I say, going to be a very tough test, and it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with it. Of course, this is another fight which is only happening in Japan. Both of these huge nights are only happening in Japan, and there is a lot of talk about Japanese fighters. They should be going and leaving Japan and fighting on the big stages and fighting with some of the best around. And there's arguments of some of these fights on these two big back-to-back nights perhaps not being quite so fairly matched, but it's it's where Japanese boxing is thriving right now. I mean, Japanese boxing is thriving at the lower weight, so why not bring these fights to Japan? And the big names should have to come over to Japan to be able to fight them. But perhaps we're just waiting to see the real big names come through. But like I say, most of the big names I suppose are in Japan, so we're just waiting to see unifications as well. Which hopefully, if somebody like an Inoue wins this one, then of course everybody wants him versus Nakatani, but he, of course, like I say, has to get through this test. Tsutsumi, is coming off a last performance where it was a brutal stoppage realistically, and it was a brutal performance where he had to answer questions in my opinion. I mean, the main question was where was his head at, and of course, before that fight, he fought Anaguchi, and it was really sad, of course, what happened with Anaguchi after the fight. If you don't know, he passed away, unfortunately, and so yeah, it was very sad, and it's gonna, of course, make a fighter question themselves and kind of question why they are doing this and things like that. And a lot of fighters who have had to go through that experience and be the kind of person who's done that have had to have struggled to go back to just being able to win comfortably and knock people out and things like that, because they do have that bit of perhaps doubt a little bit, or perhaps just like I say questioning why they're even in the sport in the first place. And it is a brutal sport. You see, unfortunately, a lot of this happen quite a lot, and I would love to see more and more be done about it to help stop that from happening. But sometimes it just is what happens in the sport. And like I say, it was impressive to see Tsutsumi be able to win the way he was in his last performance. I don't think that means that he wasn't at all remorseful or anything like that. He just was able to push through them demons and perhaps let out the maybe frustrations he had into that last fight. And I just don't think it is I think it has affected him, but I don't think it's going to be affecting his performances in the long term. And so, for his career wise, that is a good thing, and it shows he has got that strong mindset in him. And of course, rest in peace, Aniguchi. It's forever going to be really sad to see these boxing tragedies, but yeah, I mean, nonetheless, he's earned himself, like I say, this title shot, and he is one of the top ranked guys. So he is going to be there trying to stop Inoue from getting these unification bouts. And like I mentioned, they're on the first of the two huge nights in Japan. So I'm going to speak about the other world title fights and give little bits of breakdowns, not too kind of in depth of breakdowns, but little bits of breakdowns about all three of the other world title fights. And they're of course excellent to see that they're all on, and just in general, them doing these back-to-back nights show top rank, kind of flexing their names that they've got now, and they're showing off that Japanese boxing deserves to be on such a big pedestal. And it's great to see, like I say, them putting on these big events, and hopefully this is the first of many. And so also on this card is Iwata versus Noriega for the WBO World Light Flyweight title, and it's a good fight, this one. Iwata in a division now, in the light flyweight division, where perhaps it is struggling a little bit. I mean, the likes of Bomba Gonzalez, Taraji, I'm going to speak about in just a moment, they're two huge names in the division, and they have just both moved up. And, Kai Gucci's also moved up, even something like a Curiel has moved up, so there isn't really many huge names around in the light flyweight division at the moment. So, it makes opportunities to become a champion, and I believe, Iwata is already WBO champion, but, like I say, there's options for, of course, debate the vacant belt and things like that to be fought for, and other various things. There isn't really many huge names around in the division, bar that of Nonching, who of course is fighting Ibuki this weekend, but I'm sure he's going to find that same kind of problem when he looks around in the division and sees perhaps there isn't many huge names left. So I think this fight is going to be an important fight. I think it's going to be a tough fight. Iwata, of course, did lose to Bomba Gonzalez, and Bomba was kind of just in his face a lot of the time and didn't really let him get into a rhythm. And Iwata is a very technically gifted fighter and is able to be explosive, has great body work and beautiful uppercuts a lot of the time. Noriega perhaps isn't really that polished of a fighter, but I think he is physically stronger. I think he's going to be in his face. I think he's going to be bullish a lot of the time and push him back. And I think that's what might upset Wata and make him get a bit frustrated. And I think Noriega has a lot to be fighting for. He's Spanish. He's unbeaten. There's hardly any Spanish champions. There's been, talks about reasons as to why Spain hasn't really been put on the map in boxing. You kind of think of any other names, you perhaps say Sandor Martin, but even then that's not really that big of a name. So they are really crying out for a big name, and I think Noriega is going to win. I think he's going to win by unanimous decision. I don't think he's going to stop him, but I think he's just going to be able to disrupt Iwata and not let him get into a rhythm, like I say, be bullish and take away that technical ability in which he has and, like I say, push him back. And I don't think Awards is going to be able to keep Noriega off of him. And if he can use them strong, aggressive type style that he has, then I think he's going to be able to have success and, like I say, go on to a unanimous decision victory, which, like I mentioned as well, would be huge for him. And, it's a name in which hasn't really been mentioned too much yet, but he definitely could be putting himself onto a big platform. And I definitely believe that over these 2 nights of big Japanese fights, there is definitely going to be upsets. I could see that being the case, and I think this would be the first one. And then moving on to Akui versus Sharumfak for the WBA World Flyweight title, in which I think Akui will win via unanimous decision. I think it's going to be another unanimous decision. Sharumfak perhaps isn't really the highest level of opposition. I think he's not really been tested too much so yet, and I've seen him fight a couple times now, and it doesn't necessarily look anything too crazy. I believe his last fight was or the fight before was a very close fight against somebody who was 0-1 and looked very out of like novice type level boxing. And Akui is not necessarily somebody I rate crazily high. I think he has developed and improved, but I think he still gets caught a lot with silly shots and does sit in range as quite a big open target with his head on the line quite a lot. But I think he's physically strong. I think he's going to be able to let his hands go. I think he's going to be able to have success. I think he's going to push Terunfat back. And then I think he is going to be able to win by unanimous decision. Terunfat, like I say, I think he's not quite that level of that world level. And Akui is just that bit better, and he's now proven that he can fight at a world level now. And that win versus Dalaki, and obviously that wasn't his last fight, but the fight before really did show that, and perhaps prove some doubters wrong. And like I say, I'm still not massive on Akui yet. I don't think he's quite cemented himself yet. I think if he goes on to try and unify, and if he can unify, then that will shut me up. But for now, we're waiting to see. But I just don't think Jerome Fak is a world level fighter, and I think Akui will be able to find success from that. And then Taraji versus Rosales for the WBC World Flyweight title. I think that Taraji is going to win via TKO in round 10. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this fight. Taraji, like I mentioned, is moving up. I believe the last time that he fought for this belt was the only fight that he's lost. I might be wrong, but he's coming off being probably the most dominant light flyweight champion ever, and pretty much destroyed every name in the light flyweight division available to him. He was kind of waiting around for the likes of like a Bomba Gonzalez and a Nonchinga to fight each other to then make a fight with them. But I think he was just fed up of waiting a bit too long for that to happen. Of course, he had Curiel beating Nonchinga, so that slowed things down. And he just wanted a new test, a new challenge, and it's completely fair enough. Like I say, I feel like he has beaten everybody in the highest level in that light flyweight division. So he's moving up now, and it's perhaps a bit of a lesser test versus Rosales, but Rosales is coming off an impressive victory, an upset victory himself, so perhaps he's coming in with more confidence. He looked solid in that fight. He was able to use his range relatively well and was picking his shots very nicely and was catching, I believe it was Velasquez out with quite a lot of different shots, and it was an impressive performance. And Taraji perhaps isn't coming off the best of performances versus Canizales, where he was. I did think he did give away rounds. I think he was in an absolute war of a fight and was struggling a little bit. And Canizales was pushing him back and was being that, like I say, that bullish, aggressive type fighter, and was letting his hands go a lot. And Taraji was just standing and trading and not really using the movement in which he has a lot of. And so I don't think necessarily he can do that if he's moving up in weight. And Rosales is big for the weight, so like I say, I think if he is doing that, he possibly could struggle. But I think he definitely has the ability to make someone like a Rosales not have that will to win. I don't think Rosales came into that Velasquez fight. Sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. I think that's who it was. I don't necessarily think he came into that with that belief that he was going to win. I think it just came when he got a little bit surprised because the rounds were going in his favour and perhaps being a bit more easier than he expected. And then he built in confidence even more. But I don't think Taraji is going to allow that opening confidence to be there. And I think he's going to be able to win, like I say, via stoppage in round 10. And Rosales I don't necessarily know how much, he might still have a bit left in his career beating some up and coming contenders, but I don't think he may be able to get back to a world title fight again. But like I say, I think it'd be a very good performance from Taraji, and then it'll be interesting to see with a name like him, who's a big name in Japanese boxing, what he can do in the flyweight division. But yeah, moving back on to the main event, Inoue as a fighter, he's, like I say, I believe he is improving with every fight and making adjustments and necessary adjustments, therefore. And like I say, you don't necessarily know what to expect from a fighter when they are improving so much so with every single fight. He's explosive, he's definitely explosive, and he has them fast hands. He's got that explosiveness similar to that of his brother, just perhaps not really necessarily the power in which his brother possesses. So, that's what makes him a little bit different. But he is still explosive, has fast hands, often can take away best assets, and he took away Ishida's jab, which was causing him the most amount of success and was the thing that necessarily dropped him in the first place. And I know he was able to take away that asset and then be able to keep his explosive work and be able to break him down from there. And, perhaps when people were saying that he shouldn't be in close with Ishida and shouldn't have just been standing and trading, I do think it was perhaps a good strategy at times because, like I say, I think it took away his jab. He's got a sharp jab himself. He's got solid movement. He's accurate in a lot of his work. He counters always pretty much with combinations and follows up on his work very nicely. He's got great punch variation. He fights at a high tempo. I think he's got very good timing, and he can fight around the target against I've completely forgotten his name. In the second to last fight, the one I was talking about earlier, I've forgotten his name. He was, like I say, not really Enkayas, I believe it was. He just wasn't really moving and wasn't really causing too much of a threat and was just kind of stood in the centre of the ring and not really fighting too much like he wanted to fight. And perhaps that, at times can be annoying to deal with, can be tough to deal with because they are just fighting quite negatively. But he's very good at fighting around a target and finding them different angles, finding them different openings, and just moving around them and making them look silly. And that's what he did, and I believe he did that well. Negatives about him, I think physicality. He's not overly that physical. I think Tsutsumi is that more stronger physical fighter. I don't think he's necessarily too strong and physical Tsutsumi, but I think he's a little bit more so than that of Inoue. He's a slow starter, and he's been shown that a few times, and that's where he has, that's where he got dropped in the last fight, and that's where I think perhaps Tsutsumi could come on quickly and then have a bit of success in the early rounds. He, I think, can be a bit overconfident at times and have that kind of lower guard, open guard, offering his chin to his opponents at times. Like I say, just being a bit overconfident. He has that lesser power, like I say, out of the two. He can wait too long. He can be sometimes a bit unsure of his style and how he necessarily wants to play out a fight. Like I say, he's been making them adjustments, so I think he is coming into his own and is finding a style that works for him, but I think at times he can just seem a little bit unsure. He doesn't always isn't always able to get opponents off of him. He can fight emotionally, and I think he does get frustrated if things aren't going his way. I think he can duck quite low, and I don't think his defense on the inside is anything too impressive. He's got solid head movement, but his general defense on the inside, can be where he can get caught and not necessarily find the most amount of success. Tsutsumi, as a fighter, I believe he moves well. I think he's got good sharp counters as well. He's got a good jab. He's got them relaxed combinations where he perhaps isn't throwing all his punches with power, but they're nice relaxed combinations where he can stand in front of you and just distribute combinations, changing levels in the process. He's strong. I believe he pivots and works angles well. I think he does have nice pivots, and that's a good attribute of his. He's accurate as well, can fight at a middle and in close range. He gives you that false confidence. I believe a lot of the time he can just invite you into them, be able to shut you down from that false confidence that, like I say, I think he gives. He's got good power, like I mentioned. I mean, 8 stoppages in 11 fights. It's good power. I think it's a little bit deceptible power. He looks physically strong, but I think some of the knockouts from what I've seen of him doesn't necessarily look like he's hitting you that crazily hard, but it seems to be getting opponents out of there. He's got good timing as well, and a lot of the time I think some of the stoppages he gets are from the timing in which he has. Negatives about him, I think he has the lesser head movement and in general a little bit lesser speed than that of Inoue. He can't overreach on shots. He has a bit of an open guard at times as well himself. He's can be a little bit long with his shots and perhaps not bringing them as short as what they should be if he is in close. I think he can admire his work a bit at times, but I think Inoue also sometimes does that. He can be drawn into a fight. He can walk on to overhands. He doesn't always remember his jab, and he does stand straight on at times. Inoue is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Tsutsumi is going to win via TKO in round 7. I think Inoue does improve throughout the fight and is able to find the rhythm and get into that rhythm, but I think Tsutsumi is going to be able to have success in the earlier rounds, and if he can just drag that in a little bit later into the mid rounds, into the mid to later rounds, I think I could see him stopping Inoue and really putting out that statement win. I think Inoue is, like I say, still improving, but I don't think he's polished enough yet, and Tsutsumi is probably going to try and push him back, and Inoue, I think, will get frustrated, and I think Tsutsumi is going to be able to land them nice, good shots, and if he can keep as relaxed as what he wants to be, he could even land really nice counters on Inoue, and that's where I think, like I say, I think he's going to have success, and if Inoue gets frustrated, he might just want to stand in the pocket, and I think Tsutsumi, even though he isn't amazing in close, he is able to fight in close, but perhaps neither of them are amazing in close, but if it does go to that type of a fight, then I think Tsutsumi is the more stronger fighter, the more powerful fighter, and so I think he's going to be able to have success, and I know he's not going to be able to bully him like perhaps he may want to, and yeah, that's where I think Tsutsumi is going to win TKO. I think it's going to be a surprising performance, and that would kind of rule out the possibilities of him versus Nakatani, which of course is the fight in which a lot of people want at bantamweight. So who could necessarily Tsutsumi go on to fight? It would be interesting to see. I think the bantamweight division, it has got names around. I think there's the likes of Vargas could be a name. He's top contender, I believe, in WBA rankings. So why not? That could be a fight to be made. I don't necessarily think if Tsutsumi is to win that he would go on to unifications because it's still earlier-ish on in his career. So I don't think he would jump straight to a unification if he won. So something like a Vargas, the winner of Rodriguez versus Reyes, that would be a good fight. Rodriguez, of course, coming off a loss, but in a tough fight versus Reyes, or possibly Nishida if he wants to go for a title fight. The bantamweight division, like I say, has Nakatani as a huge name, but then Nishida and Takai haven't quite proven themselves to me personally yet as cemented world champions. So it could be there for the taking, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like it if you did, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.